Hello, fellow space-time travelers. I'm coming to you today from steaming downtown Pensacola, Florida. It's about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I want to talk today about thought experiments. A thought, or gedanken, is a funny name for it, a German word. A thought or gedanken experiment is the creation of a simplified, often fanciful world for the purpose of understanding the implications of a theory or observations. One of the first thought experiments was Plato's allegory of the cave, in which Plato postulates that people are able to sense a part of the universe about them only, that is, only able to sense a small part of the universe about them. The allegory explains what that means and implies. The real value of thought experiments is to generate hypotheses that could be tested in the real world. As an example, let's talk about the thought experiment Newton's Cannonball. Isaac Newton came up with this thought experiment in order to demonstrate that the mechanism that causes the planets to orbit the sun is the same mechanism that causes bodies to fall on the earth. And he called this mechanism gravity. This seems obvious to us now after the fact, but it was certainly not obvious at the time of Newton. And in fact, Galileo, who died on the very same day that Newton was born, thought that the two mechanisms were entirely different. The thought experiment goes like this. Imagine a very tall mountain. In fact, the mountain is very much taller than anything found on Earth. Now imagine that his cannon is placed on top of the mountain. The mountain exists on Earth. Now imagine that we place a small amount of gunpowder in the cannon along with the standard cannonball. Well, what happens? We fire the cannon and the ball drops to the earth at some point A, some distance from the mountain. If we put more gunpowder in the cannon and fire it, then the cannonball drops farther from the mountain at some point B, farther away from the mountain. And as we increase the amount of gunpowder, the cannonball falls farther and farther from the mountain and lands eventually on the backside of the earth. If we put a sufficient amount of gunpowder in the cannon, and the cannon doesn't explode, we can drive the cannonball completely around the earth such that it never lands. This is precisely what's happening with the moon. It travels around the earth. This thought experiment then suggests that the mechanism that controls orbiting objects is the same as the mechanism that controls terrestrial cannonballs. Well, from this simple thought experiment, Newton conjectured that gravity that controlled the motion of the cannonball was the same force that controlled the motion of the moon and the planets. Of course, he turned out to be correct. This story illustrates the power of the thought experiment. Newton took some observed measurements, the trajectories of cannonballs, then created an imaginary world that included the cannonball trajectories. He then asked, what would happen if, what would happen if something... The conclusions for what happens next in this simple imaginary world led to awareness of connections in the real world. This is the thought experiment. And it is a very, very powerful tool, intellectual tool. Thank you. That's it for today. I'm signing off from steaming downtown Pensacola. If you'd like to meet up again in space time, go down below, hit the subscribe button. Thank you very much. See you next time.